Hello and welcome to this episode of the EV Bids podcast. My name is Tory Hornsby. I have with me Rod Stuckey. How's it going, Rod?
It's going great, Tory. Good to be here.
So today we're going to be talking about 5 misunderstandings, or the title of it is the 5 most misunderstood facts about the used EV tax credit. And we'll just go ahead and jump into the very first one here, which is that the tax credit for electric vehicles only applies to brand new vehicles. Can you tell us a little bit about why that's a misconception for used electric vehicles?
Yeah, basically, it's just because that's what you hear about all over the media. That's what you hear about from new car dealers, and it's really there is a $7,500 vehicle tax credit for new vehicles, but then there's also what you don't hear about much in the news and from dealers is that there's a $4,000 used vehicle tax credit for pre-owned vehicles, and it's a significant savings, $4,000 or 30% of the purchase price. Mm-hmm. So it can be, if it's what is the number, Tory? $13,300.
$333.33.
Yeah. You just don't hear about it much in the media because you don't really move stocks on Wall Street, and you don't move the needle for OEM new vehicle sales with pre-owned. And so that was why we kind of wanted to touch on this first, is you just don't hear much about the $4,000 used vehicle tax credit.
And it is significant, when you think about that. If I'm buying, as long as the purchase price is over $13,333. So if you're buying a $14,000 electric vehicle that qualifies, and now that $14,000 vehicle is only $10,000, that's significant. Heck, even at $20,000 electric vehicle, saving $4,000 is 20% of the purchase price. So it's a very significant savings.
That's real money. And as we all know, vehicles are a depreciating asset, and when you can make a purchase and perhaps buy yourself a year, or in that example, maybe 2 years worth of depreciation that you don't have to eat on that investment, that matters both in the short term and long term ownership cycle.
That's an interesting thought concept of it paying for the depreciation. I've never looked at it that way, but
hey, you could look at it like it's paying for, maybe if you're financing, maybe it's making your down payment for you. What is a typical down payment? A lot of times, 10 to 20%. So there you go.
Yep. I do like the thought of covering the depreciation for the non-financers. That's a good, interesting thought there. Yeah. So moving on here to the second thing that's misunderstood about the used EV tax credit is that, most people think that they still have to wait until they file their tax returns. And I'm going to share my screen here while you jump into this subject, Rod. I'm going to pull up the IRS document where they released the announcement for this no longer being the case. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, this is big news. And just if you're not watching this, I'll just read from this PDF. Starting January 1st, 2024, buyers can choose to transfer their new or used clean vehicle credit to a registered dealer in exchange for an equivalent reduction in the purchase price of the vehicle. And so the key word here is transfer. And so basically the buyer at the point of sale can transfer that tax credit over to a registered dealer, therefore essentially receiving a $4,000 discount or up to $4,000 discount at the time of sale. And again, this was brand new beginning January 1st, 2024. Prior to that, you had to wait until the following year, or depending upon your tax cycle, to file your taxes to recognize that $4,000 credit. Now, also to note, this is not a deduction in your earned income. This is a real money. Again, it is a credit. So essentially, this credit works the same as a discount. Now, a couple of important notes here. You do have to use a registered dealer with the IRS. The dealer must provide the buyer with certain required information, and the dealer also must submit a time of sale report to the IRS containing the buyer and the vehicle information for the IRS energy credits. So this is just a huge, huge deal. But the key word here, if you're kind of into at a high level, it's $4,000 discount at the time of sale. If you want to understand the mechanics of it, the buyer is transferring their credit over to the registered dealer, who then basically has an accounts receivable on the books. They have to then go file with the IRS and wait to get their money. So that's why it's important that you understand and are using a registered dealer, because not all dealers are going to want to do this.
Yeah, I think this was a really smart move by the government and the IRS, which are words that I've actually never spoken before.
I was going to say, I don't know that I've ever heard such.
It's crazy. I can't. Do those words even form a sentence? I don't know. But this really was smart of the government and the IRS, because they're wanting to see more adoption of electric vehicles, and waiting until you file your tax return, and also clearing up the misconception of it's not, as you mentioned, it's not a deduction in your income. It's also not a credit of as long as you have paid as much taxes to get this. It's here's $4,000 to use towards the purchase of a used EV, paid for by Uncle Sam. So I think that making it to where it can be given at the time of sale was actually a really smart move here. They want to give the credit. They don't want people to be confused and at the end of the year forget that they even were supposed to include that in their taxes. So this was a really smart move. And moving on here, the third most misunderstood fact about the used EV tax credit is that every buyer is eligible. And I know we have people listening to the audio, but for those on the screen, Rod, do you want to take us through what is why is every buyer not eligible?
Yeah. So, unfortunately, there are some qualifications for the buyers. And they're mostly income requirements. If you're married, filing jointly, you can't have a income reported of over 150,000, and that number for head of household is 112,500, and then for all other taxpayers, it is $75,000. Mm-hmm. So there are some income requirements for used buyers.
And in addition to that, I've read two additional components are that you can't have claimed this tax credit within 3 years, and it's specific to the used tax credit. So you can't have claimed the used tax credit within 3 years. And then one additional piece there is that you can't be a dependent. So you can't be claimed as a dependent on somebody else's tax return. And I had a conversation with one of our customers who said, I don't match the income, or I exceed the income qualification. But if my son buys this vehicle and it's in his name, he does not exceed the $150,000, or excuse me, the $75,000 threshold. Can he just put it in his name if he buys it? And I said, well, of course, yeah, as long as he's not a dependent on your tax returns. And they said, oh, no, he's not. And I said, well, if he is buying the vehicle and the vehicle is in his name and he doesn't earn more than $75,000, hasn't used the used tax credit within 3 years, he's eligible. So just a couple of little interesting thoughts there of the foresight of this customer to understand that he could have his son purchase this vehicle was really another good thought. And
That's
ability to take care of
that's
the
a
tax
new one.
credit.
That's the first time I've heard that one, and that's pretty creative and makes good sense.
It's all about whose name it's going to be registered in and who we process the tax credit for. So makes perfect sense. All right. So number 4, along those same lines, there's the fourth most misunderstood fact about the used EV tax credit is that all used EVs are eligible. You want to take it away on this subject, Rod?
Yeah, so for used vehicles to be eligible, the model year of the vehicle must be at least 2 years prior to the calendar date of the year of sale. So, if it's March of 2024, it has to be a 2022 or older vehicle. That's first and foremost, is it has to be 2 years old, and then this also has to be the first transfer of that vehicle since August 16th, 2022. So basically, if the vehicle has been sold since August 16th, 2022, the vehicle is not eligible. And they're just basically, my understanding, and Tory, you correct me if I'm wrong, but they put a precautionary measure in place to be sure that multiple deductions or credits aren't done on the same vehicle.
That's correct. And because, up until January 1st, 2024, you did have to file on your tax returns. And so you've got people who maybe haven't filed their tax returns yet. Certainly for last year, they haven't. Heck, who knows, maybe even for the year before. So the IRS is just wanting to give ample time for people to file their tax returns and make sure that they're going to claim, their credit, and they're giving, what is that? It's not even 2 years; it's a year and a half at this point, to make sure that they're not going to get multiple $4,000 tax credit offerings on the same vehicle. So yes, you're right.
Yep.
And
then, lastly, not lastly, but the vehicle must be a purchase price of $25,000 or less. And that does include, the sale price includes any delivery charges, but it does exclude taxes and fees. And then the sale has to be done from an authorized, licensed, and registered dealer. So that's where kind of things get interesting in this. Is the private party market is very, very strong for used EVs. There's a ton of groups out there on Facebook. There's just a ton of listings, because let's face it, dealers are just not super into penciling high trade-in numbers on used EVs.
Especially not right now.
What's that?
I said, especially not right now.
Yeah, especially not right now. We're in spring of 2024. So, so it has to be $25,000 or less, and has to be purchased from a licensed dealer.
And I do want to just make note to those who might be watching this, who, for instance, are purchasing a vehicle via auction on EV bids, who might be having a vehicle transported to them. This delivery charge that they're talking about here is a dealer fee. So if you're buying a vehicle for $25,000 and you win the auction for $25,000, and then you're paying to have it transported separately, that's not what this is speaking of. This is speaking of a delivery fee that you see charged by the dealership. So I didn't want people to think that if they bought a vehicle for $25,000, won the auction, and they're like, yes, it's eligible, I'm good, everything is good, but I got to pay the transport company to ship this from Florida to North Carolina, and it's $700. Oh, now it's not eligible. That's not the case. This would be a dealer delivery charge that's on the bill of sale. So moving on here, the fifth thing that is misunderstood about the used EV tax credit is that from a consumer's perspective, there's just a lot of red tape It's hard. It takes a long time. It's complicated to process. So can you clear up that misunderstanding on the red tape and the complications of applying for and getting this tax credit?
Not in the time frame that we have to do this podcast. It's impossible, Tory, but I'll try to just make it as simple as possible. So, that was a joke, because it is a lot of red tape and it is complicated. However,
from the dealer perspective, but not from the consumer.
But the good news is, when you put as much time and effort as we have into understanding how this tax credit works, I want to go back to that key word of transferring the vehicle tax credit. So what we have discovered is the IRS genuinely wants they want to promote used EV sales. They really want to do that, but there's no way that in the private party sector that they could police there's no way that they could control or moderate the process in the private party market. And that's why they have created this program for dealers like EV Bids to become registered to facilitate these tax credit deals. And so what we have discovered is that we can actually administer or be the private party broker to close private party EV deals, and allow two private parties that meet up on any marketplace, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, Cars.com, Auto Trader, wherever, they can use EV Bids, and we can facilitate by basically being somewhat of the middleman. I can even use the analogy: when you buy real estate, you have a closing attorney. You don't just, the buyer doesn't just, meet the seller and do the deal. They have a title company or a real estate closing agent that administers the paperwork. And so because of all of the red tape and the legalities, and so EV Bids is able to navigate that. And again, back to that keyword of transfer, the seller, EV Bids, will actually buy the vehicle from the seller, and EV Bids will then sell the vehicle to the buyer, therefore allowing the buyer to transfer that credit over to EV Bids. And again, we can do this all at the time of sale. So you're talking about a really neat opportunity for the private party market. I mentioned all of these groups out on Facebook Marketplace, Tesla owners groups, Tesla for sale by owner groups, who can use EV Bids to facilitate these private party sales, to allow for a $4,000 discount to the buyer, and the seller gets their additional $4,000. So it's really a win-win. The seller gets more money for their vehicle. The buyer gets a straight up $4,000 discount at the time of sale. And then EV Bids is in the middle. And then we take a small fee for brokering the deal and handling all the red tape. Call it the closing costs, if you will. But really a win-win deal for both the buyer and the seller in these private party deals.
And really, the buyer, typically the buyer does pay the fee, although it could be split. But it is normal and customary for the buyer to pay it, because they're getting the $4,000 tax credit. And so the fee can just come out of that. So essentially, they're still gaining thousands of dollars as a pro of making, getting the tax credit. That they otherwise wouldn't get if they were just buying it straight from an individual through the marketplace without us in one streamline. That's the cool thing, is it's one streamlined transaction where we buy it from the seller and then sell it to the buyer. And I'll also point out one of the big differences of EV Bids, just a little plug here, is our involvement with this process to walk people through. We really take a lot of pride in walking people through this process with actual human beings and phone calls and emails and text messages to real people that are there to help you every step of the way. This isn't some automated, confusing process that can happen with just software. We're actually real human beings helping other real people to go through this process. Big advantage of EV bids there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Tory, it's not just the tax credit that EV bids helps the private party sales. To your point, I mean, we handle all of the bill of sale, the paperwork, the payment processing, whether that's ACH or wire transfer. There's just a lot of in addition to the tax credit, there's a significant amount of paperwork that has to be done. We'll even help to line up the shipping. But I think, one of the big things that we offer that's kind of an intangible is just a safe and secure transaction. Of course, with us being a licensed dealer, it means we're regulated and bonded by the state of Georgia. We have a state issued surety bond, which protects our customers and guarantees compensation for financial harm if we were to fail to comply with licensing regulations. The bond protects our customers in the event that we were to have, fail to pay any required taxes or fees. And obviously we would never allow this to happen, but our customers can feel confident and know and trust that EV Bids is committed to a safe and secure transaction. And for those that may not know us, Tory and I have been involved in dealership operations and dealerships since the late 90s. And so we've been doing this dealership game for a long, long time. And safe and secure transactions is a huge benefit for private parties with using EV bids, not just getting the tax credit.
Right. And what I was going to say, sorry, I lost my voice there for a second, but they will take your license. This isn't like it's not like, oh, you messed up, we just want you to know. They don't play. It's really, really hard to get the surety bond. It's really, really hard to get an independent dealer license. And they'll, if you're not doing business above the fold, man, they'll take it away and they won't let you operate anymore. So you are protected by that. One other thing on that point is the lien payoffs. There's always that weird, when you're doing a private party sale, when there's a lien payoff, there's always that weird, like, okay, I'm going to give you the money and then you're going to pay the loan off. And that's another thing that we handle when we're the person that is collecting the money, because the buyer is now buying from EV Bids. And then we pay the seller the full sell price, whatever the buyer and seller negotiated, the seller gets the full price. And so we're going to pay them that. So there's a lot more assurance of that safe and secure transaction. So that's a really good point, Rod. I did want to just mention on the point number 4 with what vehicles are eligible. The government has created a site, fueleconomy.gov, and you can go there and there's a page for the federal tax credits for pre-owned plug-in electric and electric and fuel cell vehicles that you just put in the year, make, and model, and it'll tell you if it's eligible. Because there is a tie-in to what percentage of the battery, what components are in the battery, where it was made, if it was in America or not. And there's no way you can look that up for every single vehicle. So best to just go to fueleconomy.gov, put in the year, make, model, and it'll tell you what vehicles are eligible. So anything else to add on this, Rod?
No, it's just last thing I would add is that, here at EV Bids, we're not some fancy tech company that you can't get in touch with. If you have any further questions, you absolutely can shoot us an email at info@evbids.com, or you can pick up the phone and give us a call, and we'll be happy to answer any questions for you, because there is a lot of red tape, and not every dealer out there has made the decision to enroll in the used EV tax credit program. It's quite complicated. There is a lot to it, and there's just not enough volume for most like franchise big dealers to warrant the time and effort that goes into this. And so that's why if you talk about this with a local dealer who has a used EV on the lot and they know nothing about it, it's just not worth their time to mess with it. We've actually done deals where we've brokered the deal with actual dealers.
Consumer to a dealer.
From a consumer to a dealer, because the dealer does not want to mess with this because they're not registered with the IRS. I mean, you got to admit, registering with the IRS, just saying that out loud is a bit fear producing. So, yeah, that's all I would conclude with, is that we're happy to help, and we're here, and we're just some regular folks out there that have really dove off into this to try to make it simple and practical for the everyday private parties to take advantage of this good benefit.
Absolutely. Yep. And our phone number, since you mentioned call us, is 770-756-9298. Again, 770-756-9298. That's our EV Bids telephone number. You can email us with any questions at info@evbids.com, or we do have a lot more information about the tax credit, everything we've discussed today, on our website. Go to www.evbids.com, and there's actually a button on the homepage that says learn more about our tax credit program. So for Rod Stuckey, I'm Tory Hornsby with EV Bids. We really appreciate you joining us for this episode of the EV Bids podcast, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.